Bill.
Nice to be with you today.
I'm so glad you're here and that we get a chance to talk about you and the book you've written and hypnotherapy and how does that help people in their lives in all levels, I guess, but all levels would be towards healing. So,
Right.
yeah. And the name of your book is The Healing Power of Hypnotherapy. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm glad you picked that topic for today. Your
Yeah.
title is right in.
Yeah. Yeah. So, maybe we could just start out about with um, what is hypnotherapy, and how is that different than your typical hypnotist that you see on television? You know, putting somebody under and telling them to cluck like a chicken. I don't think that's what you do.
No, no. The the um, the television hypnotist is most often an entertainer, and he's there to entertain people, and he does that, and he also from time to time will scare people away from any consideration of hypnosis or hypnotherapy. So I define hypnosis and hypnotherapy in very simple terms. Hypnosis is guiding a person into a state of relaxation and then giving them instructions or directions for change in habit or healing or whatever it is they would like to have fixed. And that presumes, according to the doctor with whom I studied, that the hypnotist knows much more about the person who is hypnotized than does the person who is hypnotized.
Mm-hmm.
And she thinks, and I agree with her, that's wrong. Hypnotherapy is the use of hypnosis to guide a person into a state of relaxation, and at that point a conversation takes place between the hypnotherapist and the person who is hypnotized, the client, to attempt to uncover an original cause for whatever the person's situation or circumstance or problem is, and to resolve it during that session.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so I think I read in the write-up about your book that what you do specifically is called non-directive hypnotherapy. Is that correct?
Yes, non-directed, because I'm going to ask questions and I have no idea what the answer is going to be. Rather than directing the hypnosis and directing the session and say, go back to a time when you were alive in the 14th century. Well, I don't know if that person had a life in the 14th century.
Yeah.
How would I know that?
Right.
So a person comes to me with a problem, I might say, well, go back to, we'll go back and then see if you can go back to a time that could be related to the problem that you're experiencing in this lifetime.
Yeah, yeah. Because really, if and we have a slight delay, so if I'm interrupting you or talking over you, it's because we have a slight delay. So I'm not being rude. Yeah, unless a hypnotherapist isn't doing it in a non-directive way, then how could it really be authentic? Because that hypnotherapist would be directing or kind of guiding a person into something rather than it being true for the person themselves, right?
Yes, I help do some guiding, but we're going where the client wants to go, where his subconscious is going.
Yeah.
And perhaps my role is to encourage that, to help him find it comfortable or easier instead of difficult to go in that direction.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And a question that just came to mind as far as the healing of hypnotherapy goes. And I don't know that this is true, so correct me if it's not true. Say, for example, a person out of the blue has lost their voice and they don't necessarily have any kind of illness or anything, and they don't know what's going on, and they come to see you, and you do non-directive hypnotherapy with them. Is it true that what shows up in our in physical symptoms are connected to something buried in the subconscious?
Can be that. There could be some other reasons. And obviously it would be difficult for the person to communicate with me orally if he's lost his voice entirely.
Well, this is true. It's funny
And
I picked that one. Now this is a real challenge. Okay, then what?
it's possible to guide a person, and as you say, to watch the cues from the person, and if they're moving into an area of difficulty or distress, to guide them or coach them past that, or to retrieve, to step back from it. And then other times it's possible to ask them to indicate, perhaps by a nod of the head, whether they've always had this problem with the voice.
Yeah.
And so they may indicate no.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's as simple as go back to a time before you lost your voice, or go back to a time when you were able to speak and tell me what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Bingo.
Yeah.
The voice recovers, may recover.
Yeah, yeah. So through hypnotherapy and how it applies to healing is if there's a physical symptom or even an emotional symptom or mental symptom or whatever, that hypnotherapy helps towards healing, because through hypnotherapy you can kind of get to the root of what's causing the kind of dis-ease in the person.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes it's easy to get there. As easy, and people get hypnotized in various different ways. Sometimes it's a verbal induction and guide them into relaxing all the nerves and muscles, starting at the top of the head and going down through the feet, and the whole body just relaxes. And once in there in kind of that floating, natural, neutral state, it's easy for them to access information that they don't have consciously. A person could never tell me spontaneously what the cause of the problem is. Yet when they're relaxed, and I suggest that they merely tell me what's happening. Don't try to make it up. You don't have to tell me a story. You don't have to make me feel good, create a story that you think I'm going to like.
Yeah, yeah.
And don't think about it. Just experience what's happening. And for me, in my own personal experiences, many of my hypnotherapy experiences have started with a feeling that I was on horseback. Now, I know what that feels like in this lifetime, but I would feel like I was on a horse. And so the person who was conducting this session would ask me, well, what's happening? Well, the horse is walking, or he's not walking, or I'm at the edge of a field. And so I'm kind of experiencing what's happening. Some people are visual, they see it, like looking out the window or seeing life or watching what's happening on stage. Some get it by sound, auditorily, and others get it kinesthetically, and I'm one of those. I get it by experiencing. A lot of my experiences I can talk about now as if I'm seeing them, but I know that originally, like during the session, I felt it.
Huh.
So I go back to the cause, a cause. It may be the cause, and I may have to be, or may have to guide the person back. So we go back from today, earlier and earlier and earlier in life, younger and younger, back to time of birth, back to before birth, inside the mother's body. What's that feel like? Now go back further. What's happening now? Oh, I'm in a place where it's all dark. I can't see anything. Are you inside or out? Well, I think I'm inside. Can you tell whether it's daytime or nighttime? Well, it's nighttime. I know there's a window there. and just develop what it is the person is telling me,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty quickly um, find some event that the person is experiencing and tells me about, go through the event and see how it's related to the issue that we sat down to resolve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if this happens at times for people and people that have sought you out for hypnotherapy to help them with particular life disturbances. Does this is this something that you have heard your clients express, that as they're going through life, some event will happen in the external world that triggers something in them? And from that trigger, they develop some kind of symptom, and it's really life's kind of way of clearing out those blockages that are kind of interfering from a person's overall health?
I haven't had a lot of people come to me and say, every time I drive over that bridge, something happens. So
Mm-hmm.
they just, people find me and they just sort of tell me what it is that they want to work on. Well, I have this anger problem, or every night at 5 o'clock I kick the dog, or
Yeah, yeah.
whatever. So, the dog would really like for me to stop kicking it every afternoon at 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Or possibly I have an overall anxious feeling, or I have an overall feeling of sadness, or I'm angry all the time, and there's nothing really happening in my life that would be causing these feelings. Is that sometimes what people are bringing to you?
Yeah, they can't identify what it is that's causing the feeling. Obviously, there's something, it could be the boss at work, and every time he slams his pencil down on a desk and glares at the employee in a certain way, the employee experiences some reaction. And way beyond just the displeasure of the boss and slamming the pen down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's probably not a very difficult one to resolve.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Health conditions,
what was that, Gus?
health conditions as well.
Mm-hmm.
Had a client who has Crohn's disease, and very painful.
Yeah.
Just and we did one session, and her experience regressed to a past life where she was like the wife of a rancher out on the prairie. And it was interesting because she uncovered the cause as being her ego was causing her Crohn's disease. In that lifetime, the men were going out on horseback to round up the cattle or hunt or do something, and she was going to be left alone. And she didn't feel well, but she didn't tell them that she didn't feel well. So they left. And while they were gone, she got in severe distress, and she needed water, and she went out to the well, and some animals attacked her, wild animals attacked her at the well.
Mm.
And had a little feast there on her gut. And so while that was, certainly uncomfortable for her to die like that, during that experience, she had a near-death experience as well. It was so interesting because she's the only person I ever worked with who had a near-death experience during a past life.
Huh.
And I don't remember all of the details today about that, except when we were done with the session, she said, you know what it was? It wasn't so much dying out there, but it was my ego got in the way, and I wouldn't tell my husband that I really didn't want him to leave because he didn't think I was going to be okay. And I said, no, it's okay, you can go, I'll be all right. And I wasn't. And if I hadn't stuffed it, they would have stayed, and I probably would have been okay. About 4 months later, I was back through the city where she lived, and one of her friends said, have you talked to this woman, I don't remember her name today, it was 20 years ago. And I said, no. So I called her. She said, I am so much better. I mean, she still had the Crohn's disease, but she wasn't suffering the intense pain
Oh, wow.
she'd been suffering.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's
That's one
amazing.
example of the healing power of hypnotherapy.
Yeah.
That I don't know what's going to happen in the session, but I do know that we're probably going to get in touch with some emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Emotion is released as quickly and as gently as saying, just let it go.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And sometimes the emotion is really intense. So then, I help the person back up from that experience, and then we'll nudge up against it again if they're willing. And in almost every case, they're willing. Sometimes they'll say, I can't go through this. I want to stop. So, okay, we'll back up. And they'll say, well, you say, ask your subconscious what we should do. And most often the answer is, I don't want to go through this, but I need to go through it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Subconscious knows.
Yeah.
And then we'll nudge up against it again, go a little bit further, release some more emotion, or else we can skip over it and go past it.
Mm-hmm.
Fine, everything's okay now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's back and let's go through it again, adding any newer significant details,
Mm-hmm.
feeling all the emotion, all the feelings, and letting them go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's really, really interesting. Why do you think it is that I know it's been my experience in just talking to people and being an observer of people and listening. It does seem to be that people have a fear of things like hypnotherapy. There's a fear there for people. Where do you think that's coming from? Why do you think that is?
part of it is the fear of the unknown. And sometimes, a client or a person will say, I wouldn't want to know if I was a bad person.
Mm. Mm.
Oh, why wouldn't you want to know? Well, I just wouldn't want to know that.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever they did at that time that's gnawing away at them today is going to keep gnawing.
Mm.
And it's also the unknown.
Yeah.
They don't know about it. Like, well, how will this really help me? And my answer, well, I don't know. I know it will. I believe it will.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly in what way it's going to help. I certainly haven't experienced any time when a person was worse off for going through a session.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I was just curious as to what you thought that reason was, because I think hypnotherapy is something that is really beneficial for people's healing. One of the main reasons because that illusion of control that all of us live with, when you are working with the hypnotherapist, that illusion of control kind of gets put aside for during the time that you're working with the hypnotherapist. And so I think healing is like a natural thing in our lives, but that illusion of control and that ego state of mind of it's an illusion of control that we have, because all we have control over is our own thoughts, feelings, and actions, but we have this illusion of control. And so it would seem to me that that's where hypnotherapy really would come in a very helpful way to help somebody let down that control, let down their guard, let down their fear, to let whatever needs to come through or come up to be healed to be healed.
It's interesting that you mentioned control, because that is one of the reservations people have about hypnosis and hypnotherapy. And they see the entertainer on television.
Yeah.
And they see people do what they think are some really stupid things.
Mm-hmm.
And they forget that, oh, this guy's an entertainer. This is an act. While it's an act, the people on the stage who are hypnotized, they aren't acting. they are participating. And it's not like they stood off in the wings and said, okay, when I count to 3, cluck like a chicken, and they're all counting 1, 2, and then they hear 3, cluck, 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 cluck. No, what's fun in a hypnosis stage show sometimes is you tell one person, when you hear 3, you're going to cluck like a chicken. You tell this person over here, if you hear a chicken cluck, you're going to bark like a dog. And you tell this person back here, if you hear a dog bark, you're going to hiss because you're a cat. So you count to 3. This person over here clucks, person over here barks, and the person back there starts hissing like a cat. But they're doing it because they accepted the suggestion that upon a cue they would do it.
Yeah.
And willing to do it. If they weren't willing to do it, they wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that would then probably ease a person's fears of hypnotherapy to communicate to them, which I'm sure you do, that you can't make them do something that they wouldn't willfully do on their own.
I probably can't.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not quick to agree with what you just said. Because I do hear many, many people say, and sometimes with great authority, that you'll never do anything that you don't want to do. And so when I do my sessions, I always give the suggestion that you're free to accept any suggestions I give or not.
Mm-hmm.
You can answer any questions I ask or to remain silent. Always guided in the choices best for you by your own inner wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I'm not going to trick a person. They don't really know that. And I can't say, trust me, I will not make you do anything. It's like, oh, no, you don't.
Yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
Only my client can decide if he or she is going to trust me. Doesn't matter what I say, and but I know that too.
Mm-hmm.
What is possible sometimes is to change the circumstances. So if you have a person who's a really, really, really good hypnosis subject, and you can kind of condition them, and when you see people on a stage in front of the entertainer, he's probably worked with them off stage for 20 or 30 minutes and picked 6 or 8 really good subjects out of a group of 25 or 40 or 50. And he's preconditioned them, and so they're easily hypnotized again. And when he says bark, they bark because they were given the suggestion that when you hear me tell you to bark, you're going to bark.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, I tell people, no, I'm not going to do that. And the only way they'll ever really learn that I'm not going to do that is to accept some of the suggestions and see how they're feeling about it. And if they feel that, well, I'm not going to accept any more suggestions, we're probably going to have a very short session.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, when you decided to write your book, The Healing Power of Hypnotherapy, what was your intent and your goal, and what message were you wanting to communicate to people? And if someone were to read that book, would they get a better idea of what hypnotherapy is and how they can use it towards their healing? I would imagine so, since that's the title of the book.
Yes. I wrote it because I wanted to record, to write about a number of the sessions that I had done over the years and my own sessions. So the book is a mixture of the sessions that I have experienced and also those that I have conducted. And I think every one of us has a book or has books inside of us.
Yeah.
And it's so important to write it down. I've got 3 or 4 more that I want to write. They're all on different topics.
Mm-hmm.
And but I wrote this one to put in writing about some of my sessions. And I hope that as a person reads it, they will say, oh, wow, that's really interesting. And that person was really helped. And I wonder, could it help me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If they find a competent hypnotherapist, or they can call me. And I don't do very many sessions on Skype. I much prefer to do them in person
Mm-hmm.
because I want to be right with the person, not knowing what they might experience. And I remember one session I did um, with a young woman who had panic attacks. And it had to do with her father. Her mother and father were divorced by this time, but she had severe panic attacks. And so her mother set up the appointment, and they came to see me. And the girl sent her mother off to the coffee shop so she wouldn't be there during the session. And we proceeded through the session, and pretty quickly, she's clutching her throat, her chest, and saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And she's having a panic attack right in the middle of the session. Now she's like already hypnotized, but going back to the cause, and so I'm not a doctor, but she was in clear distress. And I just said, okay, now just go past that and let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, oh, that's great. I can breathe now. Okay, good. Now let's go back. And we went through it about 5 times until the point where she could just start at the beginning of that incident, go through it, talk about it without any edge, without any emotion, and no evidence of further panic attack.
Hmm.
And she was done, and her mother called me several months later and said she has not had one panic attack.
Wow.
And it's really thrilling to get that kind of feedback. I often don't get feedback, and I've mentioned a couple of times when I have, but usually I just do the session. It's complete at the end of the session, and I'm always happy to talk with the person again, but I generally don't hear about it. I did a session in Virginia with a woman who had a very bad case of psoriasis, and I thought that we would uncover the cause of her psoriasis, and she called me about 4 months later, and she said, I just wanted to tell you what happened at the office today. The women at the office asked me what's wrong with me. She said I had to ask them what they meant. And they said, you've been so much easier to get along with in the last 4 months. Her emotional state healed.
Wow.
Her skin, the doctors were trying everything, experimental drugs, combinations of experimental drugs, trying to find something that would help her skin heal, but her emotional state healed.
Huh.
And it was so interesting when I met this woman, I thought it might, and I would never say this to a client if they asked me, do you think I'll be hard to hypnotize? But when I met her, she was like what I would call tightly wrapped. No evidence of emotion.
Mm.
Very matter of fact. And I remember having the thought, I wonder if I'm going to be able to hypnotize her. I think she did ask me if she would be hard to hypnotize, and I said, I think so. And she said, how long will it take? And I said, I think about like 5 or 10 seconds. And I remember telling her, I'm just going to count to 5, and you'll be hypnotized.
Hmm.
Ready? And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And immediately she said, they're killing everyone. She had a woman friend sitting there with her to protect her from this guy who's going to hypnotize her.
Yeah.
And she said, and she was instantly in a past life. And she was a Native American boy, about 9 or 10 years old.
Yeah.
Outside the village, the raiders came, the men were gone. The raiders came, they killed all the women and children in the village, and the raiders went away. This boy fell asleep in the hot sun out in the field. He was safe. And he went into the burned village afterwards, not knowing where he was going to go or what he was going to do. And he was just getting ready to leave. He didn't find anybody alive. And getting ready to leave, and he heard a baby cry. He had to go find the baby, and the baby was under some blankets where the mother had put the baby. And then this Indian boy is mad because Indian boys don't raise babies. That's women's work.
Mm.
But he can't leave the baby. So he picks up the baby and they start down the trail. And then this woman said, wait a minute. I'm not the boy. I'm the baby.
Mm.
It was really cool. And there was a spirit connection between the baby and the man, and they stayed. The two of them stayed together, and it's a fascinating story. And I thought that maybe the burning of the village had triggered the condition of her skin.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And,
yeah.
So every time I think I know the cause, I think I know the answer, I think I know what's going to happen next. Fortunately, my training is ask the question, what happens next? And I find out I don't have a clue.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And that's really great because otherwise you would be leading that person and then it wouldn't be true for them. It wouldn't be what's true.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So that's interesting that you're talking about a skin condition because I have a friend who, I don't know what day it was, one day last week, she stopped in, she was visiting from another state, and she stopped in to see me. Well, when she came to visit, she was covered from here down in hives and a bright red rash, severely so. And she ended up, her heart rate went really high, and it was hard for her to breathe. So she ended up in the hospital, and they put her on steroids and something to ease the itching, and eventually the hives and rash calmed down, but she's still having a hard time breathing, and they don't really have an idea what caused the hives. They think maybe a body wash she used. Well, she ended up, she couldn't fly back with her daughter, so she's staying with me until, we don't know yet. We don't know when she's going to be able to fly. So I'm just wondering, I don't know, there was kind of like a gut sense in me that the rash was coming from something, the hives were coming from something emotional rather than physical. But I don't know that. I mean, it was just a feeling, just a sense. So is that and now she still has the shortness of breath. So is that something that a person in that kind of, where the doctors can't figure out what's causing this, could they turn to a hypnotherapist and find some help maybe that doctors aren't able to do?
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Maybe.
And Dr. Irene Hickman, with whom I studied, was always asked the question, is it possible to? And she said, yes, anything's possible. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. But the other thing is not to be really careful not to destroy hope.
Yeah.
And I did a hypnosis session with a woman here a couple of months ago, and right after the session, she got the hiccups. Really bad. I mean, she was bad hiccups. And one of the other tools I use is the tapping, EFT, the emotional freedom technique, where you tap on energy points. And I remember saying, would you like to get rid of the hiccups? And she said yes. And I said, I'm just going to show you how to do this tapping thing and get rid of the hiccups. And she said, will it work? I said, of course it'll work. With great confidence, keeping a straight face. So I guided her through one sequence of the tapping and really just kind of pushed her through it really fast because she wanted to think about what she was doing. And I said, no, don't think about it, just do it. Tap, 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 here and here and here and do that. And we went through one sequence, and when she was done with it, I could see in her face she was waiting for the hiccups to resume, and they didn't.
Oh, wow.
And she's used it herself several times since. And I'm sure the key was when I said, yes, it will work. It worked.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I said, well, I don't know if it'll work or not,
Right, right. Yeah.
it's kind of like the fire walk. If you think your feet are going to burn, guess what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
And if you have your state, your mental state, your state of mind, if you have it set that I'm walking on a bed of cool moss,
Mm-hmm.
and the walk I did was 12 feet. Tony Robbins has people walking 60 and 80 feet
Mm-hmm.
on coals. I mean, they are red hot.
Yeah.
And 80 feet is a long way. Just 80 feet is a
Right,
long,
right,
12 is a long way when you're looking at that first 12 feet.
right, right. So,
And
so that would be a case of mind over matter.
um, that's probably the easiest description. I think there's more to it than just mind over matter. I mean, you absolutely have your mind on it. I remember one man told me that he wondered, halfway through the walk, he wondered if his feet were getting hot. And his feet started to get hot. So real quickly, back into the cool moss, cool moss, cool moss.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's interesting. So your book then is a lot of examples and stories of not only sessions, hypnotherapy sessions you've done with other people, but experiences of your own.
Yes. It was so interesting the way that I learned. Um, about 30 years ago, I was interested in hypnosis, and I remember going to some classes, and I wasn't hypnotized. I didn't get hypnotized. Other people did, but I didn't. And then even when I did the first short introductory hypnosis course that I took, I didn't get hypnotized. So when it was time to do little sample bits with the other participants, I found I could hypnotize others. And I remember I was thinking about this yesterday, one man in particular, he was mad that I didn't get hypnotized when he read the script to me. But I definitely did not. I was listening to him read, and I was listening to the words, and I was wondering why did he say it this way instead of that way, and didn't he miss a word or a sentence somewhere? And so my mind is actively at work. I'm thinking about it instead of just getting hypnotized. And I remember he got mad. And then it was when I got to Dr. Irene Hickman's home in Kirksville, Missouri, where I stopped in for a weekend to learn a little bit more about hypnotherapy, that I found out what it was actually like to be hypnotized. And I remember my first experience. I think I was probably rubbing my hands or something. My hands were cold. And I found out really quickly with Irene, you didn't ever say anything was wrong, because if you did, she would ask if you wanted to know why.
Mm.
And sit down in the hypnosis chair and get hypnotized and find out why.
Mm-hmm.
So she hypnotized me with her standard method, and which is just a real fast verbal induction. And go back to the time that your hands were cold. And I had an image in my mind of when I was about 4 or 5 years old, opening the old refrigerator door and sliding the chair over and standing on the chair, and I was going to get a popsicle out of the freezer. Well, it was the old type refrigerator with the ice thing in the middle, the little freezer compartment. And if you touch that metal with your finger, you got stuck to the metal. So that was, well, she knew that wasn't the reason. So go back to any other time. Well, that was when I said, I feel like I'm on a horse. And she developed that with me. And just a quick summary of the experience was I was on horseback, and I was in a blizzard, and I had ridden my pony into a ravine full of snow, and I was Native American.
Mm.
And I had robes on, like a buffalo skin or something, and I knew that my squaw and 3 kiddies had left the tribe back in the spring. We had roamed all summer without making any preparations for winter. We got caught in an early winter blizzard, And I put them in the cave with the rest of the meat and the blankets and stuff, and said, "Stay here. I'll go to. I think there's a town 2 days away, so I'll go get help and be right back." And jumped on my pony. Well, I rode him into a ravine full of snow, and he was stuck, and I was freezing on this pony. So I thought, okay, well, I got to get off the pony and get huddled up here in the skin and get warm, and then I'll be able to go on. And I couldn't get off. So then I thought, well, I have to fall off here. I'm freezing to death on the pony's back. And so I rolled off the pony onto the snow.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought my plan was to huddle up in the skin and get warm. And when I hit the snow, I couldn't move. So I froze to death.
Oh.
And I was really sad because I knew my family would die because they would be in the cave and waiting for me to come back, and I wasn't going to come back. So that was strike one. Strike two was I knew I was going to die because I was freezing to death there on the ground and couldn't move. But I was really sad because I knew that pony was going to die, and that pony did not deserve for me to ride him into that ravine. And so after I died, the realization that I had, the connection between that life and this life, was this life is how I live that life. I don't plan ahead. I don't store up any nuts for winter. I don't save anything. If I have some money, I spend it. And so at that point, 20 years ago, I made a decision about, gee, is that really the best way to live life? And so I started on a path of correction in this life to planning ahead a little bit further. I still don't plan ahead really well, but better than I had for years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw the connection. And I also, about 7 years later, I was out in California, and I had a realization that my stepson from my third marriage is one of the children from that time where I left the kids in the cave. Hadn't been able to take care of them, hadn't taken care of them. But why I am so engaged in this boy's life this time. I met him when he was 7. I'm still in contact with him 20 years later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. That's yeah, really.
So that experience is in the book. That was my first experience, and I've had several others that have involved horses, and some others that have been pretty interesting too.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you would be willing to do this. What would you think if we did another short interview in the near future, and what if we did an online hypnotherapy session? What would you think of that idea?
We can explore that. The benefit to someone watching it is it's not very exciting to watch.
I would find it exciting. I think I would.
You'd be interested in perhaps you'd be interested in the content. What is it that's happening? But it's kind of hard to connect the path because the person who's hypnotized is experiencing something, but it's all happening inside.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So a visual recording of that would not necessarily get across the experience of it.
Yes.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share about who you are and what you do in connection to hypnotherapy and using it for the benefits of healing before we close our interview?
Well, I was thinking about how I ended up in this work. And that 30 years ago, I was curious about it, but I couldn't be hypnotized. And in 1988, how I met Dr. Hickman, I was a volunteer at a conference on the paranormal, and I was manning a book table during a break. And Dr. Hickman walked up to the table. I was holding a book on hypnosis, and she asked if I were going to buy that book. And I said, yes, I think I will. And she took it away from me. put it down on the table, picked up a different book, handed it to me, and she said, here, buy this book. This is better. I wrote this book.
Oh, okay.
Then she inscribed it to me with adventure awaits all who explore the mind.
Yeah.
Before she left the table, of course I had to buy the book because she inscribed it to me. And I'm glad I did, and I still have it. And I got her business card, and she invited me to come to her home in Missouri if I ever got interested in learning more about hypnotherapy. Well, I was in Colorado. I grew up in Missouri. I was never going back east. So I thanked her and tucked the card in the book. 4.5 years later, when I was passing through Missouri, having left Colorado for the third time and heading for South Carolina, where my daughter lives, I decided I better read her book, and I called Irene and said, hi, I'm going to be near Kirksville. May I come by? You know, it was only 4.5 years ago that we met. So I dropped by for what I thought would be a weekend, and I stayed 7 months.
Wow.
And we made a little deal that if I would work in her office, if I would answer the phone, write the letters, sell the books, travel with her to conferences and workshops and hypnosis conventions, get her scheduled as a speaker at meetings and set up trainings, then she would teach me everything I needed to know about hypnotherapy. And I could live in her home. She had a very large home, including a family of 7 who lived on the second floor who took care of the house when she traveled. And so my room was downstairs in the finished family room, and I was there 7 months. And during that time, I got to meet people like Brian Weiss, who wrote Many Lives, Many Masters,
Mm-hmm.
who wrote Life After Life,
Mm-hmm.
and Brinkley, who wrote Saved by the Light.
Mm-hmm.
Dan's story is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been meaning to call Raymond Moody and Daniel because they live in Aiken, South Carolina, and that's only about 80 miles from where I am right now.
Oh, neat.
And I don't know that they'll remember me if I call up and say, you know, we met 23 years ago. I'm sure you've been waiting for me to call. Probably not, but I think I'll call anyway.
You never know. You never know.
And
Mm-hmm.
I encourage each person to explore it, find out if it can be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, of course. So I will include your contact information with this video when I post it online.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate you taking the time to do this today. I really do feel that hypnotherapy is a beneficial modality for healing on all levels. And I appreciate the work you do, and I respect the work you do. And I just really want to thank you for doing this today.
Thank you very much, Irma.
Thank you, Gus.